Hey everyone, Chris here with another filler episode. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a trio of modern DOS games. Now a couple things I should point out before I go on. Firstly, to me, a modern DOS game is one that was made way beyond the point in time when making games for DOS made sense, since everyone had migrated over to Windows by then and few games are being produced anymore without the use of hardware acceleration. This point in time tends to be around the start of the millennium, so I consider the year 2000 to be the cutoff date for the games that I review. Truth be told though, there's not a lot of DOS games made after this point in time. The other thing I should point out too is that DOS has always been intrinsically easier to program for than Windows. Well, at least to a certain extent. What I mean is, the moment you start wanting to add features like digitized sound effects and super VGA graphics, it actually becomes easier to do that stuff in Windows thanks to programming libraries that handle all of these things for you. The ones I use for my games are the Allegro game programming libraries, which are actually cross-platform and used to support DOS as well, giving rise to the first game on our list, Lacewing. Lacewing is, at its heart, a 1 to 2 player overhead shooter with SVGA graphics and Sound Blaster sound effects. It was originally released in 2003 by Linley Hensel and Captain Pork. Yeah, that's seriously the name he goes by. In any case, the game can still be downloaded from its homepage at users.olus.net.au/zel, and to get it working in DOSBox, all you gotta do is set the cycles count to max. The whole idea of the game is to survive a progression of levels, destroying critical targets along the way. Once all critical targets are destroyed, you move on to the next level. The trick, however, is in dealing with the time limit and powering yourself up. You have a Powerup Bar at the bottom of the screen which functions much the same way as the Powerup Bar in Gradius, except that every entry on this bar can be activated a total of 5 times, getting progressively stronger with each activation. There's also 15 different ships you can fly, each with their own set of power-ups, arranged in different ways to emphasize certain aspects over others. For instance, the ship I'm flying here is known as the Aether Squid, and it's the only ship to have multi-fire in the first power-up slot, meaning you can get a fairly decent spread of shots going with very few power-ups, as opposed to just firing 2 shots straight forwards. However, armor is stuck all the way in slot number 6, and all armor does is raise your maximum integrity by 25 points. So powering up your armor for greater health is possible with this ship, but likely not the best use of your power-ups. Each level also has a time limit. If you don't destroy all the critical targets before time runs out, the level's defenses activate, sending powerful electrical sparks through the underlying grid. However, you don't want to destroy all the critical targets too quickly because plenty of minor enemies spawn from the upper area of the level, which you can destroy to collect more energy pockets, which you can then use to grab more power-ups. I find the best approach is to destroy all but a single critical target, then hunt down minor enemies until the last 15 or 20 seconds, then go for that final critical target to end the level. Don't get me wrong though, this is a really hard game, and I've only ever beaten it once in the past decade. Plus, because the critical targets you face are somewhat random, combined with the different ships you can fly, every playthrough is going to end up different from the last. My best tips to help you out are to get your shields going as quickly as possible, focus on your ship's easiest power-ups to get, but try to get at least 1 point into every power-up it has, and if a minor enemy touches the bottom of the level, they'll unlock from the grid and will explode on impact from that point on, meaning if that happens to an enemy, you should either ignore it, or if possible, destroy it from a distance. There's actually a couple different split-screen 2-player modes as well. You can either play the main game cooperatively with pooled lives, or you can go up against each other in a duel. Though keep in mind that the dueling system is just an extra really, and that some ships are better at it than others. Also, since this game lacks joystick support, key lockups are a real possibility in the 2-player mode. But thankfully, the default controls are really well suited to most keyboards for 2-player support, and a special key testing option can be accessed to test out various key combinations to see if they register properly or not. Plus, I think you can get around key holding limitations by mapping keyboard keys to a joystick using DOSBox's key mapper, but I'm not 100% certain about that. In any case, let's move on to the next game in our list, Cache Invaders. Cache Invaders was made by Ouvert and was originally released in 2002. It uses VGA 320x200 256 color graphics and has Sound Blaster sound effects. If you want to get a copy for yourself, just head on over to the game's homepage at members.home.nl/bas.de.ouvert/Cache Invaders. And to get it running in DOSBox, again, all you gotta do is set cycles to max. The joystick support even works without any extra configuration, but I don't recommend using it because you press up and down to change your selected power-up, which is too easy to accidentally do with a joystick or even a gamepad. Now, I gotta be honest here, when I first downloaded this game, I had no idea what the heck the title was referring to. But it's actually pretty simple. Basically, it's just a Space Invaders type game where every single enemy you shoot drops money for you to collect. Now this creates an interesting dynamic, since you not only have to watch out for the enemies shooting at you, but when you shoot them, you also need to worry about collecting the money they drop. Well, that is if you want to take advantage of the various power-ups on display. On the right side of the screen you have a selection of power-ups, but this doesn't quite work exactly as it did in Lacewing. Instead, you spend the money you collect on whatever power-ups you want and can afford, some of which are ammo-based and run dry as you fire them, some of which are time-limited and only last a certain amount of time. You can also buy 1-ups, but these are really expensive, going for 150 coins each, so I don't recommend buying them unless you absolutely need to. Truth be told though, the game's made in such a way that you really can beat it without using any of these power-ups. The power-ups just make things that much easier. My favorite power-up has to be the magnet power-up, since while it's active, all coins float towards your horizontal position, meaning you don't have to concentrate so hard on collecting them and can just blast away. Combined with the scatter shot, this can make some levels go by in seconds while still collecting most of the money that would be dropped. In a pinch though, the magnet power-up plus an Uzi works just as well. I recommend avoiding the boomerangs and grenades though. The boomerangs don't really have anything too special about them, especially considering how expensive they are, and the grenades are fun, but they're difficult to use and you don't really get that many shots with them, so it just makes more sense to go with the other weapons. Or heck, you can even stick with your main gun the whole way through if you can just smash the spacebar fast enough. While it might seem like there's a limit to how rapidly you can fire your weapons, there actually isn't. So if you can hit that spacebar fast enough, you'll fire your shots much more rapidly than you would by simply holding the spacebar down, which can be pretty helpful. One other thing too is that later on you start to encounter much larger enemies that drop gold coins instead of silver ones, which are worth 2 coins instead of 1. The only trick is that these larger enemies like to shoot shots straight towards you as opposed to straight down, meaning their shots are trickier to dodge. You also want to be careful of invulnerable enemies, which don't disappear until you've cleared all the other enemies that you can destroy. Not really too much else to say about this game, except that it really could have used a 2-player mode of some kind. Now, while it's still very playable, has good difficulty curve, 100 levels to face, and every time I play I get just a little further than the last time, so it's an all-around good game. Lastly in our trio of modern games today is the most modern DOS game I have, though it also works on the least modern hardware possible, and that game is Paku Paku. Paku Paku is obviously a Pac Man clone, but what's intriguing about this game is that it was written to run on the most outdated DOS hardware you can think of. It was written by Jason Knight and released in 2011. Yeah, just last year. Yet it's designed to use that strange hacked CGA 160 by 116 color graphics mode that virtually nothing else used. Though it does have some extra code added so that it will work on some EGA and VGA hardware, but for those systems you generally have to add a special command line parameter to get it working, and it won't exactly look perfect when you do that. As for sound support, this thing supports the PC speaker, the Tandy 3-voice chipset, the Creative Music System, AdLib, heck, it even has general MIDI support. Though the original plan was just for PC speaker and Tandy 3-voice, so the Tandy sound is the best way to go, which you can get working by switching the machine type under DOSBox to Tandy mode. Though I should point out that the CMS support sounds identical to the Tandy 3-voice support. It just takes more steps to get it working that way. As for actually getting the game, just head on over to the author's website, www.deathshadow.com, and there you go. When running in DOSBox, just make sure to set the machine type to Tandy and leave cycle set to auto. Or if you prefer the AdLib sound instead of the Tandy 3-voice sound, just set the machine type to CGA instead. If you're still getting AdLib sound with the Tandy mode though, you may also have to set the SB type value to none. But yeah, as far as gameplay is concerned, it's just a very basic Pac Man clone, but polished extremely well. So much so that you would almost swear that this was the actual Pac Man game released for PCs, except that the actual Pac Man game released for PCs was kinda lame. Not nearly as lame as most of the Pac Man clones released back in the mid-80s, but you get my point. This game here was made under the same hardware restrictions those games had, yet it's nearly arcade perfect, not something a lot of arcade ports to DOS could attest to. Though this game does have a couple of minor drawbacks. The first is that there's no 2-player support. Yeah, considering two-player Pac-Man has always been turn-based, that's really not that big an issue. Though imagine two players playing Pac-Man on the same map at the same time. Now that'd be pretty cool. As for the other drawback, this is actually the easiest version of Pac-Man I've ever played. I mean seriously, on my second playthrough ever, I got all the way up to the point where the power pellets stopped making it possible to chow down on the ghosts. I don't even know if that's part of the original arcade game or not, any of its ports or clones, because I've never been able to get that far in any of them. I think the main reason why it seems too easy is because the AI doesn't really like following the player. And in fact, each ghost tends to have this sort of pattern that it follows based on the movements of the player, so it's surprisingly easy to predict what the AI is going to do. On the other hand, the AI does have a trick up its sleeves. Any ghost that hits a corner or intersection can do a total 180 and go back the way it came. I'm pretty sure this isn't supposed to be possible in the arcade game, but whatever. Considering how easy this version of the game is, this really isn't that big a deal. So yeah, that was just a quick look at some modern DOS games. There aren't actually a lot out there anymore, and I would say that these three are probably the best you're gonna find. But if you do go looking, there are a number of others, including a surprisingly large number of text adventures. And whatever, stay tuned for the next episode of Ancient DOS Games, episode 96, where we're going to take a look at a game that billed itself as an alternative to Daggerfall. Now, you'd think that would make the game pretty epic, but it's sold so badly, I don't even have the full version, yet it's actually a surprisingly decent game. So if you think you know which game it is, make sure you send your guess to ADG at pixelships.com, and tune in next Saturday as we give this game some desperately needed attention.